Hello YouTube, it's Lion here with Hobbies of a Man once again, and today we're going to do another light novel review. Today's review focuses on Cooking with Wild Game Volume 2. This one's written by Ida, and it's illustrated by Kochimo. It's published by J Novel Club, and the genres here are isekai, and I would say gourmet / foodie and slice of life are also good genres for this. It doesn't currently have a anime adaptation, but I think the newest volume of the manga adaptation is coming out relatively soon, if it hasn't come out already. I can't remember. And yeah, so the way I do my reviews is that I look at 5 things. I look at plot, characterization, and world building, and then I rate the book on these. And then I also look at art and fan service, and those are purely for the enjoyment of the piece. Art is purely subjective, so I just share my opinion, and the fan service is a word of warning for those that are not exactly sure that they enjoy that stuff. So yeah, the premise of this book is that Asuta's pride as a chef, essentially, has been deeply hurt by the comments, or lack of thereof, of the males of the Ru clan. And so he essentially challenges Donda Ru, the head of the Ru clan, to this, it's not a cook-off because he's not cooking against anyone, but it's of him cooking something that he will enjoy, because the whole aspect that they talked about last time was that this mushy, soft meat of the hamburger was detrimental to the soul of the hunter, which is the soul of the pride of the Ru clan and the people of the forest edge. And so Asuta is like, okay, fine, I'll make something that you like. And yeah, and so he has to prove that his food is worth Donda Ru's palate. And if he wins, he gets blessed, and if not, well, he's gonna die. And yeah, and then there's a side story at the end of the book, which is actually probably more interesting than the actual book. Well, not true, but it's a rather good one, and I really like the message behind it. And yeah, I'm gonna stop holding that because it gets heavy. The plot here is rather good. It definitely upped the stakes, and it didn't lose any of the stuff that made it fun. I really love what essentially is barbarian barbecue that they had at the end. And I like how most of the plot revolves around that, and the characters don't really lose any opportunities to grow or develop, even though the plot is rather, small in scope. Yeah, that's basically it. And so I don't really want to go that in depth into everything, but essentially it picks up right where the last one ended. So they wake up, they have this situation happen, and then they leave early. After that, Asuta comes up with this crazy scheme, and so has to practice like crazy in order to make something that, Donda Ru will enjoy. The thing is that first they have to build a bunch of extra stoves, which Aifa is like totally for once Asuta explains that he needs more stoves in order to make hamburgers larger, because she loves hamburgers, but she didn't like that at her house they were tiny, while at the Ru clan's house were like large pieces. And he explained that it's because he couldn't control the heat of a single stove with the precision needed to be able to cook a piece of hamburger, or a hamburger, the right way. And so he had to focus on small hamburgers so they wouldn't overcook. And so she was like, okay, fine, let's build like 3 more stoves. And yeah. The characters here are fun. Like I said, I loved the growth that they experienced. Asuta had a lot of experience as a person, a lot of growth as a person. Because at the beginning, he was very much like just acting because of his wounded pride and his like desire for these people to understand his side of things, but he never looked at their side of the things, of the situation, I mean. And so he understood that although Don Daru was rather mean in the way he said what he said, that it totally makes sense for these strong people of the forest edge to want to eat food that is hearty like them. And hamburgers, although delicious, are probably not the heartiest thing that they could eat. And so in order to help them, I guess, or in order to satisfy them, he makes this essentially barbecue, like pork ribs and stuff, in order to make something heartier, more stiff, less chewy feeling to them. And then the whole thing is he can't eat it because him as a modern person has essentially developed in a different way that makes him and his human faculties much softer in comparison to these people. So although his teeth are strong and clean and don't lack anything, they're still weaker than these people's because he's used to eating soft things. And I think that's not exactly scientifically correct, but he makes a point of explaining, how our minds, our ability to think way outside the box affects our bodies negatively because we can bypass a lot of things. And so our bodies no longer have to be as strong as they once were, which I think is a realistic view. And I think a lot of people actually argue this, that, the way that humanity worked before was that the strongest men were the ones able to have children, and the strongest women were able to have children, or like the most appealing women in those senses were able to have children, and everyone else fell to the wayside. And so humans, naturally through natural selection, were built up. And then with the introduction of civilization, there's a certain amount of decline in the baseline human ability because our minds are able to bypass a lot of these natural limitations. And so it was just really interesting, and I didn't think that there would be this depth of what's it called, philosophicalness in this type of book. It was rather interesting. And the background that we get on Ifa at the end in the side story is actually pretty similar in scope or in depth, but it's about a different topic. So, let's talk about that actually. So Ifa's side story focuses on her soon after her dad died, because we learn in the first volume that she's been living alone for 2 years and essentially ostracized from the rest of the village because she chose to live as a hunter, something that according to their culture is, completely wrong of a woman, because they're rather, old school primitive civilization type of people. But she said, no, I don't care. I want to be my own person and develop my own ability to look after myself, right? And so I thought that was a rather good message, and I thought that it was really interesting because it's not really just about a woman being empowered and going her own way or anything. It's rather a message that everyone needs to hear and that everyone should try to do. Like, she spends a long time thinking about how she wants to live a certain way, and that might alienate her from everyone else, but it's still the right thing to do because she needs it for herself. And a lot of people are rather bad at that in the modern world. So I thought it was a really interesting thing, and it transcended, Western gender politics or anything like that. It went above and beyond and showed this depth that the author put into these books that at first glance you would think is ridiculous that they would exist in this book. And yeah, I just thought it was really cool. So world building here is rather good as well. Besides all that, we get introduced to the way weddings work in these for these people. We also understand a bit more of their culture, some taboos and gender preferences and traditions that they have. And we get new foods added. I really can't remember any of the top of my head, but I remember that they were added. There's some new vegetables that get introduced that he initially says not to use because he doesn't know how they react. They might affect the food negatively, so he chooses not to use them. But I assume that in the next volume, he will take them into account and try to make something new. New clans were introduced, or like mentioned beyond just like a passing comment. It was good. It wasn't anything out of this world, but it was, you know, there. And so I liked it. And the art here again is lovely. Here's the first one. I like that they have different colors for their clothing. I like that. I think if they both had orange clothing, it'd be rather boring. That's Reina and that's Vina. Yeah. Here's Don Daru when they do the challenge, which is almost like a food war from Food Wars, obviously. And here's a slightly fan service-y thing. There you go. And here's a picture of the three guys in the Rue clan. Ludo is a very laid-back guy. There you go. The other two are a bit more rough around the edges. There's the first image. Ludo is like, here, I'll give you all of my tusks, which are blessings or money in this case, if you just keep one of my sisters as your wife and introduce all this beautiful food to us. And Asuto's like, what the heck? No, man, I can't do that. Mostly because Aifa is right there and she's like his romantic interest for now. Here's another scene. This one's a little racy. It's interesting and it's fun the way that the situation played out, but it's nothing to write home about. Here's the next one. Yeah, I'm not gonna offer any more context for any of these, I think, because these are all rather further in. Here's the one I was talking about where she's sad that hamburgers at her house are really small. And I thought it was a rather cute image. There's one thing to note. Why are all of these so small? Why? I know a lot of artists do that thing where instead of putting a background, they draw a square and then color it in. But I don't see why they would do that for this type of thing. Here you go. There's Aifa. Well, I can't remember if that's Aifa. It might be one of the Rue sisters that she's really angry and she's gonna hurt Asuta. Here you go. This is a rather emotional scene. See, the thing with the square, again, like there's a lot of empty space. So maybe it's for the sake of making the image movable across different screen sizes. I don't know. This guy is a different village chief, or a different clan chief. He's a cool guy. Well, he's kind of rough around the edges at first, but he's cool. Here's Asuta having a very serious apology. Here you go. It's a bit of a resolution. And here, I think this is from the side story. That's Aifa, and I think that's her dad. And yeah, like I said, I really like the art style. It doesn't feel sketchy. It feels very finished, although, like I said, I don't like the fact that the background for most of those pictures is rather, you know, limited. But I don't know why. It might just be stylistic, and I don't understand it. And yeah, it's lovely art. I really like it, and I might have to check out the manga if the art is similar. And yeah, fan service. Obviously, as you guys saw, there is some fan service in this book. I wouldn't say it's all that bad. It's rather innocent. Well, okay, it's not innocent, I guess, but it's not over the top. It's rather, you know, just fun, situational comedy type of stuff. And yeah, so my rating of this book, a 5 out of 5 or a 10 out of 10. Although honestly, it's mostly for Aifa's side story. If the side story wasn't there, I'd probably give this a 3.5 or a 4. And yeah, I recommend this title. I can't think of anything that's similar, but yeah. Thank you very much for watching. See you later.